breaking up is hard to do. You have to separate your comic book collection and decide who gets the X-Men comics and who gets the Spider-Man comics and what to do with all those crossovers. It can be really emotional, I assume. Anyway, after 5 MCU appearances, including 2 solo movies, it seems like Sony and Disney have gone their separate ways again, with Sony taking their Spider-Man and going home. While Spider-Man no longer gets to be with the Avengers he loved so much, he does rejoin the rest of the Spider-Man universe that he left in Sony's hands, including one traditionally Spider-Man-obsessed symbiote. Does this mean we'll see Spidey in Venom 2? Let's look at why that might be. It's been an emotional roller coaster of announcements and counter-announcements as studio heads and stars have all publicly and privately come to terms with the fate of their wall crawler and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's familiar territory for Spider-Man. In the 1990s, when Marvel was struggling financially, they had a garage sale of sorts with the film rights to their characters. Stan Lee notably wanted to sell the entire lot as one unit, but couldn't get any takers, so, desperate for cash, they sold off their 3 biggest titles. Fox bought Fantastic Four, and Sony bought Spider-Man. But the path to the big screen for Spider-Man wasn't that smooth. Whatever you think of the 3 franchises we got, it could have gotten far worse. Which is all to say, Spider-Man is no stranger to issues of film rights. The latest spat comes after Sony, the final winner of the Who Gets the Rights to Spider-Man saga that had lasted over 25 years, forged a deal with Marvel when their attempt to reboot their franchise didn't work out as planned. Meanwhile, Marvel's shared cinematic universe was going gangbusters, checking off the #1 thing on most Marvel fans' wish list, including Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige. Sony and Marvel had come to an agreement to share the character, and Spider-Man swung his way into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, played by the affable Tom Holland. But the love affair had a time limit on it, and that was 2 movies. 2 movies later, and Spider-Man is in the superhero billion-dollar club, with Spider-Man Far From Home breaking into 10 figures at the box office. What exactly happened next seems entirely reliant on who is asked. Marvel, it seemed, wanted more creative control over the character and a larger cut of the box office. Sony was perfectly happy with the current agreement, where Disney kept the merchandising rights and 5% of the first run. The 2 companies agreed to disagree, and now Spider-Man is saying goodbye to the MCU. All parties involved have kept a cheerful outlook for the kids. Kevin Feige said, "I'm feeling about Spider-Man gratitude and joy. We got to make 5 films within the MCU with Spider-Man, 2 standalone films and 3 with the Avengers. It was a dream that I never thought would happen. It was never meant to last forever. We knew there was a finite amount of time that we'd be able to do this, and we told the story that we wanted to tell, and I'll always be thankful for that." While Sony Pictures tweeted, "Much of today's news about Spider-Man has mischaracterized recent discussions about Kevin Feige's involvement in the franchise. We are disappointed, but respect Disney's decision not to have him continue as a lead producer on our next live-action Spider-Man film. We hope this might change in the future, but understand that the many new responsibilities that Disney has given him, including all their newly added Marvel properties, do not allow time for him to work on IP that they do not own. Kevin is terrific, and we are grateful for his help and guidance and appreciate the path he has helped put us on, which we will continue." Aw, see, it's nice when they don't fight in front of the kids. One of the contentious points between Marvel and Disney during their brief affair was what exactly was and was not part of the MCU. Spider-Man unequivocally was, but Sony had franchise ambitions of their own that involved Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery, one of the best in comics. High on that priority list of properties was the iconic Spider-Man villain Venom, who got his own standalone movie in 2018 starring Tom Hardy. Even with Peter Parker being absent from the Venom movie, Sony still wanted Venom to be a part of the Spider-Universe, and therefore by extension, the MCU. Depending on who you asked and when, Venom existed or didn't exist in a world with Spider-Man. Well, now that Spider-Man is back in the exclusive hands of Sony, that argument can finally be settled. While Spider-Man says goodbye to the Avengers and the MCU, he is now free to say hello to Venom and the other franchise movies Sony had planned, including films based around the Spider-Man Haters Club, The Sinister Six, Silver Sable, and Black Cat. Venom is on his way back to theaters with a second installment set to start filming in late November, with Tom Hardy's Venom prepared to square off against Venom's unruly offspring of sorts, Carnage. In the comics, Venom has been a lethal challenge to the wall crawler. One of the only reasons that Spider-Man has survived his encounters with Venom is the symbiote's complicated feelings about Peter Parker. Having first bonded with the heroically obligated Parker, the symbiote has looked for a way to replicate that sense of purpose, but without the comparative values for things like life to base them on. Carnage, however, does not have that problem. Formed after Venom left a little bit of himself behind in prison, Carnage first bonded with serial killer Cletus Kasady. Free from any constraints on trying to construct what being a hero might mean to an alien or care for, well, basically anyone, Carnage has been an even more powerful foe for Spider-Man and anyone else who might get in his way. Carnage has been such a big concern that Spider-Man had to enlist help from Venom himself. Now that Spider-Man is solely back in Sony hands, Sony has the opportunity to replicate that, even if a little backwards in their upcoming Venom movie. Tom Holland has stated his commitment to continuing on with the role he so clearly loves playing, saying at this year's D23, "All I know is that I'm going to continue playing Spider-Man and having the time of my life. It's going to be so fun, however we choose to do it. The future for Spider-Man will be different, but it will be equally as awesome and amazing, and we'll find new ways to make it even cooler." Now, there's already an in-universe mechanism for this to happen, and it's one that was introduced to audiences last year in the Oscar-winning animated film Spider-Man Into the Spider-verse. This gives Sony an out in regards to the tricky situation of Tony Stark. Presumably, Marvel had painted Sony into a corner by making their Spider-Man stories so intertwined with the MCU. Both Spider-Man movies have dealt heavily with Tony Stark's mentorship of the young hero and the fallout from Stark's death. This has included making two iconic Spider-Man villains, the Vulture and Mysterio. Both have their beefs primarily with Tony Stark, but the multiverse, introduced in the MCU by the Avengers time-tripping shenanigans, creates just the window that Sony needs to slide Peter into their own Spider-verse. This would mean that an unsuspecting Venom reality would suddenly get a Spider-Man from Earth 19999, otherwise known as the MCU. Things like Edith and Happy Hogan with his flying spider suit creating machine would no longer be at his disposal, which could mean that Spider-Man could get a new look. Maybe even the iconic black suit, that led to Venom in the first place? Perhaps in the collision that lands Peter in the Venomverse temporarily splits Eddie Brock and the symbiote, who takes a ride on the superpowered Peter Parker. Peter, accustomed now to a suit that talks back, tries to tame the symbiote. While younger, Peter has a stronger sense of purpose, but Venom's more aggressive tendencies eventually turn Peter off of the symbiote. In that struggle for control, as Venom returns to Eddie Brock, perhaps even angry at being rejected, and part of him lands with Cletus Kasady. This would be a bit of a departure from what they appear to be planning, however, with the cinematic Venom story revolving around a nefarious tech company experimenting with the alien symbiotes. So maybe Carnage is created in an attempt to get the Venom symbiote back, and the relationship between Venom and Carnage is removed. Either way, the end result would be a Carnage on the loose, and Spider-Man and Venom having to form an uneasy alliance to stop him. While much of the story would be unique, given how much the stories of both Spider-Man and Venom have departed from what led up to Maximum Carnage, not to mention the absence of other allies like Reed Richards, it would be awesome if the final showdown takes place at a heavy metal concert, where Carnage's downfall is Peter Parker cracking the volume up to 11. Regardless of how Carnage is defeated, the Venom movies have already established their own reasons why Carnage might be too much for Venom to deal with on his own. In the comics, one of the things that makes Venom unique, even among Clintarians, is his origin. Briefly, he was separated from the hive of symbiotes and experimented on by the Kree, who wanted some of that sweet shape-shifting that the Skrull have. In the Venom movie, the Venom symbiote forms an attachment to Eddie Brock because of a kinship he feels. Rather bluntly, Venom considers himself a loser in the symbiote society and sees that in Eddie as well. Not exactly relationship goals, but no one ever said the relationship between Eddie Brock and the symbiote was a healthy one. Eddie's time with Venom has also convinced Venom to stop his fellow symbiotes from taking over the Earth as planned, which means facing down Riot, who Venom points out is stronger and more powerful than he is. In fact, when Eddie asks the Venom symbiote what his chances are, he says basically zero. Venom ultimately doesn't even defeat Riot. After Brock's ex-fiancée uses audio feedback to separate the two symbiotes, Riot is able to reform and runs Eddie through with a Necro Sword. It's only when Venom returns and sabotages the shuttle Riot is on that Riot is killed. so it stands to reason that Venom would need some superpowered super help when dealing with Carnage. Riot was bonded with industrialist Drake, who had his own motives that were misguided, but Kasady's are just killing for killing's sake. Either way, Sony's grasp on Spider-Man is contingent on a use it or lose it principle, so we're bound to see Spider-Man sooner rather than later. Those are some of the ways and reasons we might expect Spider-Man to show up in Venom 2. What are your thoughts? Would you like to see Venom and Spider-Man team up against Carnage? What do you think that will look like? Let us know in the comments, and hey, while you're there, why not form a symbiote relationship with the subscribe button? You'll gain the power of new videos straight to your inbox. Thanks for watching.